Welcome back. It was quite the week for Bitcoin this past week. The cryptocurrency trading below 10,000 for a couple of points this past week, only a month after hitting 20,000. Ironically, Bitcoin started to slide shortly after JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon told me this. Let me ask you about Bitcoin, because that was another famous comment that you made, that it's a fraud. Now we see institutions.
Which I regret making. The blockchain is real. You can have crypto dollars and yen and stuff like that. ICOs, you got to look at everyone individually. The Bitcoin, it was always to me, was what the governments are going to feel about Bitcoin. It gets really big. And I just have a different opinion than people.
So in an interview with the Financial Times, Glenn Hutchins was called the best establishment, or the first establishment sort of investor who took a deep dive on Bitcoin. You own Bitcoin indirectly or directly. Tell us your position.
My primary interest, I have some investments in some ETFs that have exposure to the coins. But I own that because it's a product of a company I sit on the board of. But my primary interest is in companies that use Bitcoin technology to revolutionize the way we move value around the world. Just the way we've used the internet over the last 20 to 25 years to revolutionize the way we move information, voice and video, and commerce around the world. And so what's the most important thing about business? Information and value.
Right. And you can move money. And it's virtually, it's not free because there are transaction fees, but you can move money and you can do it anonymously?
Well, not anonymously, it's pseudonymously. So okay. Pseudonymously, which means that you and I don't have, the main thing here is you and I don't have to trust each other to do a transaction. The cost of trust is why costs are so high for moving money around.
Interesting.
Right, so since you and I have to trust each other, intermediaries get to insert that trust. They take away the fraud risk, the credit risk, the settlement risk, the custody risk, et cetera, the foreign exchange translation risk, all those sort of things, and they charge for doing that.
Is that why the big banks were initially skeptical on Bitcoin, because it's removing them, it's removing the intermediary?
Well, look, it's a very nascent industry. It's like the internet was in the early 90s. And we're a long way away from, we've got the math solution to this problem of trust-free exchange. That was where the Bitcoin came from. And we're now beginning to create engineering solutions that can move that math solution, just like the development of the internet, went from math solutions to engineering solutions to companies to transformation. So we've got the math solution and beginning to have the engineering solutions. Now we're building out individual companies, which I'm investing in, that address the credit card market, that address the remittance market, that address some very new markets, like machine-to-machine payments, really interesting, that are building the infrastructure. And then those companies have to come up with business models that solve real customer problems. So that's 5 to 10 years away. This is a very, very small, nascent industry that has a chance to be transformative, but has to do a lot of work between now and then, just like the internet in the early 90s. That's why I say the Bitcoin price is a distraction. People are all focused on the wrong thing. They're looking at the store of value, the gold equivalent notion of Bitcoin, rather than the means of exchange features of it that can really be transformative. They're also missing the fact that Bitcoin could be the wrong solution. Bitcoin could turn out to be Betamax, and some other token like Ethereum or Ripple or Zcash could end up being the right answer, could turn out to be VHS.
How do we know which one it should be? I mean,
we don't.
What are the metrics that you look at in terms of understanding?
Can you take that technology and turn it into a solution that solves an important customer problem and allows you to build a company around it? Mm-hmm. That's the answer. Are you going to be pets.com or are you going to be Google?
Yeah, big difference. Right. What about regulation, Glenn?
I think it's very, very important for this to work inside the regulatory framework. If you go back to the early days of the internet, and the early days of computer technology, there was also this pie in the sky thinking about these are ways we're finally going to get rid of commerce and break down hierarchies and have a utopia. There's always been out there as a parallel trend in technology. But the banks as regulated entities, deposit-taking, lending organizations will always be bulwarks of the financial system. What the Bitcoin technologies will enable us to do is to address the parts of the businesses that aren't in that regulated sector, payments, remittances, or that are more lightly regulated and they can work in collaboration with the regulated parts of the industry to have become an important part of the legitimate financial system.
I feel like one of the reasons that Bitcoin sold off this past week was because people are worried about heavier regulation. I mean, when I speak with people about the skeptics on Bitcoin, they say, why would I own one of these cryptocurrencies? They're not backed by the trust and faith of the U.S. government. You can't compare it to the dollar in that regard. Are we going to see more regulation as a result of that?
Well, I think there ought to be smart regulation of this industry for sure. But one analogy I want to make for you is that Bitcoin is like the various currencies are more like industrial metals. Bitcoin is more like copper than like gold. It's useful. Its use case. People buy and sell copper. They speculate in it. But the reason why copper is valuable is it's used in wiring homes, and it has an industrial application. Silver and palladium have industrial applications. Tin and zinc have industrial applications. And so that's why Bitcoin is valuable to the extent that Bitcoin solutions get implemented in companies that have more Bitcoin created and increase their value.